I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but I need to tell you what happened to me, what God showed me, how He saved me, not just my soul, but my life here on earth. My name is Lydia Thornton, and on November 13th, 2019, I died for 13 minutes. That night changed everything. Before I tell you what I saw on the other side, you need to understand how I got there. The bruises that led to my death weren't the first ones. They were just the last ones I would endure before God intervened. I met Marcus when I was 22. He was charming, attentive, and seemed like everything I'd ever wanted. We married after just 6 months. Looking back, the red flags were there from the beginning. His jealousy, how he isolated me from friends and family, the way his mood could shift in an instant. But I was young and thought that's what love looked like. Intense, all-consuming. The first time he hit me was 2 years into our marriage, after our daughter Sophia was born. He apologized immediately, crying and promising it would never happen again. I believed him. When our son James came along 3 years later, things only got worse. Marcus would control what I wore, where I went, who I talked to. He monitored my phone, my computer. If dinner wasn't ready on time or if the children were too loud, his rage would explode. I stayed because I was afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid he would take the children. Afraid no one would believe me. Afraid because he told me I was worthless, that no one else would ever love me. And I believed him. The night everything changed was like many others, except worse. Marcus had lost his job that week. He'd been drinking more than usual. The children were already asleep when he started. Something about money missing from our account. Money I'd secretly been saving in case we ever needed to escape. "You think you can hide things from me?" His words slurred together as he cornered me in the kitchen. "You think you're smarter than me?" I remember trying to explain, trying to calm him down. "I was just saving for Christmas presents," I lied, my voice shaking. The first blow caught me off guard, even though it shouldn't have after all these years. My head snapped back against the cabinet. I tasted blood. "Please," I begged. "The children will hear." That only made him angrier. "Don't you dare use them against me," he hissed, grabbing my throat. I don't remember much after that, just fragments, the cold tile of the kitchen floor, the sound of my ribs cracking, praying that the children wouldn't wake up. And then, darkness. What I do remember, what I will never forget, is what happened next. There was a moment of clarity in the darkness. The pain suddenly stopped. All at once, I felt myself rising, floating upward. I remember thinking, "This is strange," before realizing I was looking down at my own body on the kitchen floor. I could see everything with perfect clarity. My body lay crumpled and broken, blood pooling around my head. Marcus was slumped against the wall, his head in his hands. I wanted to feel angry, to hate him in that moment, but all I felt was a deep sadness. For him, for me, for our children asleep upstairs, unaware that their mother lay dying. I noticed paramedics rushing in. A neighbor must have heard the commotion and called 911. I watched them work on my body, their movements urgent. One of them said, "We're losing her," and another responded, "She's gone into cardiac arrest." I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. Instead, I felt a profound peace washing over me. Then I noticed a light beginning to form in the corner of the room. It started small, like a pinprick, but grew stronger and brighter until it was all I could see. I felt drawn to it, as if it were calling to me. As I moved toward it, I entered what seemed like a tunnel. The light grew more intense, but it didn't hurt my eyes. Instead, it felt warm and welcoming, like coming home after being away for a very long time. I moved through this tunnel rapidly. Behind me, I could hear the faint voices of the paramedics growing more distant. "Clear!" "No pulse." "Again." But these sounds no longer concerned me. I was focused on what lay ahead. As I neared the end of the tunnel, the light expanded, revealing the most beautiful landscape I've ever seen. I struggled to find the words to describe it adequately. Colors existed there that don't exist on Earth. Richer, deeper, more vibrant. The sky wasn't just blue. It was alive with light that seemed to pulse with joy. The ground beneath me, though I wasn't exactly walking, shimmered with what looked like millions of tiny diamonds embedded in lush green grass. Flowers bloomed everywhere, their petals opening and closing in a gentle rhythm that somehow felt like music. In fact, there was music all around me, not coming from any particular source, but simply existing as part of the air itself. It was the most beautiful harmony I'd ever heard. Like countless voices singing in perfect unison. The air felt different too. Each breath, though I don't think I was physically breathing, filled me with energy and clarity. Every inhalation felt like taking in pure love. And I could feel everything around me. Not just see it or hear it, but truly feel it, as if everything was connected, as if everything was part of one greater whole. As I took in these surroundings, I noticed figures moving in the distance. They were people, or beings that appeared as people, clothed in what looked like light itself. They radiated joy and peace. Some seemed familiar, though I couldn't quite place how I knew them. One of these figures approached me. As they drew closer, I recognized my grandmother, my father's mother who had passed away when I was a teenager. She looked younger than I remembered her, vibrant and healthy, her face free from the pain that had marked her final years. "Lydia," she said, her voice filling me with warmth. "You're here." I wanted to embrace her, but I wasn't sure how in this form. Somehow she understood and enveloped me in what felt like pure love. It wasn't a physical hug, but something far more profound, as if our souls touched. "Grandma," I said, surprised I could speak. "Is this heaven?" She smiled. "This is just the beginning. A threshold." She gestured to the magnificent landscape around us. "There's so much more." "Am I dead?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Your body is no longer sustaining life," she confirmed gently. "But this isn't the end, Lydia. It's a new beginning." As we spoke, I became aware of other presences around us. Some were familiar. An uncle who had passed years ago, a childhood friend lost to cancer in her teens. Others I didn't recognize, though they all greeted me with the same love and warmth. "There's someone who wants to see you," my grandmother said, leading me forward. We moved through this beautiful landscape, though I can't say we walked in the conventional sense. It was more like gliding, or perhaps like thought itself. I would think of moving forward, and I would be moving. As we progressed, the light grew even brighter, more intense. But again, it wasn't blinding or uncomfortable. Instead, it felt nourishing, like sunshine after a long winter. We approached what appeared to be a vast open space, like a great courtyard or garden. In the center stood a figure emanating light so brilliant it outshone everything else. I knew immediately who it was, though no earthly description could capture his essence. Jesus. He didn't look exactly like the paintings or statues we see on Earth. He was both more human and more divine than any artistic rendering could capture. His face radiated compassion and wisdom beyond measure. His eyes, I will never forget his eyes. Looking into them was like seeing the entire universe and feeling completely known, completely loved, all at once. As I approached him, I felt overwhelmed by my own unworthiness. Every mistake, every sin, every failure in my life played through my mind. I remembered times I'd doubted, times I'd turned away from faith, times I'd failed to help others when I could have. I remembered my anger at God when my life with Marcus had become unbearable. Why hadn't he helped me? Why had he abandoned me to such suffering? I wanted to fall to my knees, to hide my face, but there was nowhere to hide. Not here. Not from him who sees everything. "Lydia," he said, and my name in his voice sounded like a song. "My daughter." His voice was like nothing I'd ever heard, powerful enough to create galaxies, yet gentle enough to soothe a frightened child. It resonated not just in my ears, but through my entire being. Tears, or whatever corresponds to tears in that place, flowed freely down my face. "Lord," I managed to say, "I'm sorry. I've failed so many times. I wasn't strong enough." He moved closer, and the love radiating from him was almost too much to bear. "There is no condemnation for those who are in me," he said. "You are washed clean. You are mine." His words washed over me like a healing balm. I felt every burden lifting, every wound healing, every dark corner of my soul illuminated by his love. But then, like a tide rushing in, memories of my life flooded back. My children, asleep in their beds, unaware that their mother was gone. What would happen to them now? Who would protect them from their father's rage? "My children," I cried out, the joy I'd been feeling suddenly overshadowed by intense concern. "Sophia and James, they need me. They have no one else." Jesus looked at me with such compassion that it took my breath away. "I know your heart, Lydia. I know your love for them." "Please," I begged, my voice breaking. "I need to go back. They won't be safe without me." The tears flowed freely now as I poured out everything I'd kept inside for years. "Marcus, he hurts me, but I've always been there to protect them from the worst of his anger. If I'm gone..." I couldn't finish the sentence. The thought was too terrible to put into words. "Come," Jesus said, extending his hand. "There is something you need to see." As I took his hand, the garden around us seemed to dissolve, and we were suddenly somewhere else. Not on earth, but not in heaven either. It was like a space between spaces, where time had no meaning. Before us appeared something like a vast screen or window showing scenes from my life. But these weren't just memories. They were deeper than that, showing not just what had happened, but the ripple effects of every choice, every action, every word spoken. I saw myself as a child, innocent and full of hope. I saw the moment I first met Marcus, how my heart had leapt at his attention. I saw our wedding day, my face radiant with joy and expectation. Then the scenes grew darker. The first time he criticized me publicly. The first time he grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. The first slap. The first punch. Each incident worse than the last. I saw myself making excuses for him, hiding bruises with makeup and long sleeves, lying to emergency room doctors about how I'd gotten my injuries. "I'm so clumsy," I would say with a forced laugh. "Fell down the stairs again." I saw my children's faces, how they would freeze when their father's voice raised, how they had learned to make themselves invisible when his mood darkened. I saw Sophia at 7 years old, comforting her 4-year-old brother after witnessing one of their father's outbursts, whispering, "It's okay. Mommy says it'll be better tomorrow." The pain of these visions was almost unbearable. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Watch," Jesus said gently. The scenes shifted, showing what would happen if I returned. I saw myself waking up in a hospital bed, broken and battered but alive. I saw Marcus at my bedside, tearfully promising to change. I saw myself believing him again, returning home. And I saw the cycle continuing, growing worse each time. Then the vision changed again, showing a different path, one where I didn't return. I saw my funeral, my children clinging to my sister Elaine, who I hadn't spoken to in years because Marcus had forbidden it. I saw Elaine fighting for custody of Sophia and James, presenting evidence of Marcus's abuse that I had sent her secretly over the years. I saw a judge awarding her full custody. I saw my children growing up in Elaine's home, safe, loved, healing from their trauma. I saw them as teenagers, then adults, living full lives. Not perfect lives, but lives free from the constant fear and violence they had known with their father. "This is but one possible future," Jesus explained. "The gift I gave to all my children is free will. Your choices, and the choices of others, shape what will come to pass." I stood in silence, absorbing everything I had seen. Part of me wanted desperately to return to my children, to hold them one more time. But another part recognized the truth in what I had been shown. "I failed them," I said finally, fresh tears flowing. "I should have been stronger. I should have left him years ago." Jesus turned to me, his gaze filled with infinite compassion. "You did the best you could with what you knew at the time," he said. "You stayed because you thought it was the only way to protect them. Your love for them never wavered, even in the darkest moments." "But it wasn't enough," I said, the reality of my situation crushing down on me. "No one should have to endure what you endured," he replied. "The violence inflicted on you was never your fault, never your choice. Marcus chose his path, just as all must choose." I thought about this, about all the years I had spent blaming myself, thinking if only I could be better, do better, he would stop hurting me. "Why didn't you help me?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for years finally finding voice. "Where were you when he was beating me, when I prayed for it to stop?" There was no judgment in his eyes, only sorrow and love. "I was there, Lydia. In the neighbor who called for help when she heard the violence. In the nurse who slipped you the domestic violence hotline number during your last hospital visit. In your sister who never stopped trying to reach you despite being pushed away. I work through people, Lydia. I placed help in your path, but the choice to accept it had to be yours." His words struck me deeply. I remembered the neighbor who had invited me for coffee, giving me concerned looks when she saw my bruises. The nurse who had asked me quietly if I was safe at home. My sister's persistent messages that I had deleted without reading because I was afraid Marcus would see them. Help had been there all along, if only I had been brave enough to reach for it. "The children," I said again, my heart still torn. "They need their mother. They need to be safe," Jesus corrected gently. "And they will be. Your sister will love them as her own. The seeds you planted in their hearts, your love, your faith, your strength, will grow." As he spoke, I felt a strange sensation, like being pulled in two directions at once. Part of me was still here, in this divine presence, but another part seemed to be drifting elsewhere. "What's happening?" I asked, suddenly alarmed. Jesus smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in his expression. "Your body is responding to treatment. The paramedics are trying to revive you." "I have a choice?" I asked, understanding dawning. "You always have a choice, Lydia. I force no one's hand." I closed my eyes, thinking of my children, of Marcus, of the life I had lived and the possible futures I had been shown. "If I go back," I said slowly, "can things be different? Can I find the strength to leave him for good?" "The strength has always been within you," Jesus answered. "What you lacked was not strength, but belief in that strength. You are worth more than the treatment you've accepted. You were created for more than fear and pain." He placed his hand on my heart, and warmth spread through my entire being. "Remember this moment," he said. "Remember what you've seen and what you've learned. If you choose to return, take this truth with you. You are loved beyond measure, worthy of respect and kindness, and you are never alone." The pulling sensation grew stronger. I could hear distant voices more clearly now. "We've got a rhythm. BP's coming up. She's fighting." I had to decide. Stay in this perfect peace, this complete love, or return to a broken body and a broken life, but with a chance to make things right for my children. I want to go back, I said finally. I need to protect my children. I need to break this cycle. Jesus nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. Then go with my blessing and my strength. Remember, Lydia, perfect love casts out fear. He embraced me, and in that embrace I felt strength flowing into me. Not my own strength, but something deeper, more enduring. Thank you, I whispered. The scene around me began to fade. The light, the beauty, the music, all growing dimmer, more distant. Jesus' face was the last thing I saw before everything went dark again. And then, pain. Terrible, searing pain throughout my body. The harsh glare of fluorescent lights, the beeping of machines, the cold rush of air into lungs that hadn't breathed on their own for how long? "She's back!" someone shouted. "Get the doctor in here now." I tried to speak but couldn't. Something was in my throat, a tube helping me breathe. Panic rose in me until a gentle hand touched my arm. "It's okay, Mrs. Thornton. You're in the hospital. You're going to be okay." A nurse leaned over me, her face kind but serious. "You were in cardiac arrest for 13 minutes. We almost lost you. Can you squeeze my hand if you understand me?" I managed a weak squeeze, my mind reeling from everything that had happened. 13 minutes. It had felt like both an eternity and an instant. As my eyes adjusted to the harsh hospital lights, I noticed police officers standing outside my room. Then I remembered. Marcus, the beating, my death, my choice to return. The doctor arrived, checking my vitals, examining my pupils. "Mrs. Thornton, you've suffered severe trauma," he explained, after removing the breathing tube. "Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, head trauma. It's nothing short of miraculous that you're still with us." Miraculous. If only he knew. Later, when I was stable, a police officer and a social worker came to speak with me. They told me Marcus had been arrested. The neighbor who called 911 had given a statement about what she'd heard, and the evidence of long-term abuse was clear from my injuries and medical history. "Your children are safe," the social worker assured me. "They're with your sister. She came as soon as she was notified." Elaine. Just as I had seen in the vision, she had always been there, waiting for me to reach out. Recovery was slow and painful. I had 3 surgeries to repair the damage Marcus had inflicted, physical therapy to regain my strength, counseling to begin healing the emotional wounds that ran even deeper than the physical ones. But through it all, I carried what I had learned on the other side. The strength Jesus had shown me wasn't something new he had given me. It had been there all along, buried under years of fear and self-doubt. My sister brought Sophia and James to visit when I was strong enough. The relief in their eyes when they saw me, alive and awake, is something I will never forget. They climbed carefully onto my hospital bed, mindful of my injuries, and I held them as tightly as my broken body would allow. "I'm sorry," I whispered to them. "I'm so sorry for what you've seen, for what you've been through. But things will be different now, I promise." And they were. Marcus was convicted and imprisoned. I filed for divorce and was granted full custody. With Elaine's help, I found a small apartment where the 3 of us could start over. I went back to school, finished the nursing degree I had abandoned when I married Marcus, found a job that allowed me to support my children on my own. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the fear returned, when I would wake up drenched in sweat, certain that Marcus had found us. There were days when the children's trauma manifested in nightmares, in Sophia's anxiety, in James's sudden fits of rage that mirrored his father's. But we healed, day by day. We found a church community that embraced us, supported us. The children received counseling. We built a new life, not perfect, but free from violence and fear. And always, I remembered what I had seen and experienced in those 13 minutes. The love that had enveloped me, the truth that had been revealed to me, the strength that had been awakened in me. People sometimes ask me if I'm angry at God for allowing me to suffer for so long. I tell them no. God never wanted my suffering. He gave all of us free will, including Marcus. What Marcus chose to do with his free will was not God's choice, or mine. What I do believe is that God was with me through it all, in the kindness of strangers, in the persistence of my sister, in the resilience of my children, and most powerfully, in those 13 minutes when I stood in his presence and was reminded of my worth, my strength, and his endless love. I know now that the experience wasn't just for me. It was so I could share this message with others who might be where I was, trapped in cycles of abuse, believing they have no way out, thinking they're not strong enough to leave. You are stronger than you know. You are worth more than you've been told. And you are never, ever alone. My name is Lydia Thornton, and this is my story. I died for 13 minutes, and in those minutes I was given the truth that saved not just my soul, but my life. Perfect love casts out fear. It cast out mine. It can cast out yours too.